Good morning. It helps when I unmute my microphone, that's for sure. So we're just going to wait a couple of minutes to make sure we've got a few people that have joined. Apologies if my voice is a little bit crackly this morning. I was at PAX Australia all day yesterday, which was absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, if you were there, I hope you had an awesome time. So today we're going to be chatting about selecting the right fabrics and making sure that when you're going to make that beautiful pattern you've been salivating over, that it's the right fabric for that pattern. At the end of the day, there's nothing worse than picking the wrong fabrics for a beautiful pattern that you've been looking at for such a long time. And we just want to make sure that if you are going to be going ahead and making a beautiful pattern, it is the right fabric to choose. It can make all the difference between you being really, really happy with your project and ending up putting something on and going, why did I even bother to make this in the first place? So what we're going to do is have a look at some patterns for a start and make sure that we're knowing where to find the information about fabrics and which ones we should be choosing, as well as figuring out what does that guideline actually mean. Do I have to use only those fabrics? Are there other options? There are other options. So now look, we're in a bit of a different space today. This is my sewing room. I'm normally in my cutting room. I'm very, very lucky that I happen to have two rooms that I craft from. I'm going to take my glasses off because they're reflecting a bit strangely on the screen. So you can see here that behind me I've got three different machines. This is my Janome Memory Craft 8200. This is what I use for my standard sewing. It's a semi-industrial machine. Behind that, this one here is my overlocker, which is a Burnett B64 airlock. And then behind that is the Burnett B68 airlock cover stitch. So we're going to talk about machines on another live stream and choosing the right ones for you and how to go about that. But just in case you're wondering what it is I use, those are the ones that I use. Now, apologies if we do have some feline companions. Momo, please don't, my love. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to do a little quick duck off and just make sure that people know that we are live. Let's quickly grab this and we're going to go over to Instagram and go, hey, we're live. There we go. All right, and I reckon we should possibly put that in Facebook as well. All right, there we go. Okay, so what we're going to do is firstly have a look at, I'm going to pull up a thread loop screen a little bit separate to everything else. Notice I use thread loop a lot. Hey thread loop, if you want to sponsor me. cheeky, hey. Okay, so we're going to have a little play around here. And I'm going to make my screen a little bigger so I can see what I'm actually doing. I'm going to make this one a little bit smaller. All right, what are you screen capturing, my friend? Let's not get it to capture Messenger, and we're going to get it to, there we go, Google Chrome, that's what we're looking for. So if you haven't used Threadloop before, Threadloop is something that allows you to store your patterns, your fabrics, and just keep a track of all of your sewing, which is super handy. I love my Threadloop and I use it quite a lot. So we're going to head over to Threadloop and just have a look at how we can really go through patterns and look at what kind of fabric would suit that. And we're going to look at a couple of different types of patterns. So let's start with this new Bronte dress from Style Arc. Now, what we are going to look at is not the pattern on Threadloop, because on Threadloop, sometimes it does have what are the fabric requirements, what are the fabric suggestions, but there's usually a more extensive list on the actual pattern itself. So this is a pretty new pattern from Style Arc, and it's one that I recently bought because I saw it and just could not go without it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Excuse me, I need a bit of coffee. All right, so the Bronte dress from Style Arc has some very, very interesting style lines. The way that this one is constructed, it's got lots and lots of pleats, and it's what's called an all-in-one dolman sleeve. So it should be relatively easy to construct. It comes with two different neck options, either a round or a V-neck. And it is designed for woven fabrics. So if we have a look here, it talks about things like measurements and estimates, you know, how much fabric do you need, pattern format details. But there's not always a lot of information. You'll see here, fabric suggestion, crepe, rayon, linen. What that tells me is that this dress is designed for woven fabric. So you can see here the Bronte woven dress sewing pattern. Now, what does woven mean? Woven basically means a non-stretch fabric, and knit means a stretch fabric. So you can make a woven pattern, so a pattern for a non-stretch fabric, out of a stretch fabric. You can do it. There's some things you do need to take into consideration when you're making that kind of change, but I just want to start with saying yes, it can be done. Can you make a knit pattern with a woven fabric? So a stretch pattern with a non-stretch fabric. Again, the answer is technically yes, but the amount of adjustment that you have to make is significantly more. Because obviously with a stretch fabric, let me have a look in my little basket of doom. Here we go. So we've got some stretch fabric here. I'm not going to show you the other side because I don't want to get done for licensing. So this is a cotton lycra, and it's got a fair amount of stretch in it. All right. This is a cotton sateen. A cotton sateen is a woven fabric. It has very little stretch in it. In fact, it has almost none. Cotton sateen is one of the few woven fabrics that is woven in a way that has a very mild amount of give and stretch, but it's probably not even 5%. So if you were wanting to make a pattern out of this fabric, you want to look for one that says woven. And especially while you're learning to sew, stick with the recommendations of the pattern until you really start understanding how to make those changes, how patterns work and come together to shape around your body. Do yourself a favor and just make it easy for yourself, genuinely. So what we are going to do is dive a little bit deeper into the pattern instructions, because the pattern instructions will quite often have a little bit more detail about fabric choices. And I'm just going to go on over to make sure, yay, you guys can see that. Okay, so we can see here fabric suggestions, crepe, rayon, linen. Still not a lot of options. So something I always recommend when you do start sewing is do a little bit of research about fabrics. Go and read information about fabrics and what is a crepe, what is a rayon, what is a linen fabric. In fact, we might even just bring that up in the screen. Types of fabrics. Here we go. So this is a really good resource. I've looked at Masterclass before. So this gives you a really, really good rundown of the different types of fabrics. Now, one thing I do want to say is that there is a difference between fiber and weave. Okay. So when we say something like a cotton lycra, let's give an example of these two fabrics. Okay. These are both cotton. These are both made from the same fiber, but they are woven differently. So if we come back up here to cotton, you'll see it says cotton is a staple fiber, which means it's composed of various different types of lengths of fibers. Cotton is a natural fiber and it's made from cotton plants. So if you've never seen a cotton plant before, let me show you what a cotton plant actually looks like. Cute little fluffy thing. If you've done any interstate driving, you've probably seen cotton plants by the side of the road in fields in country areas. So they are very commonly grown. There is a little bit of an issue with growing them in some parts of the world because they use huge amounts of water. Particularly in Australia, they do consume a huge amount of water, and I think there are some other options that are sometimes better, but in terms of a sustainable natural fiber, cotton is easy to grow, it's cheap, it's easy to weave, and it is a very, very good choice, particularly to start with. I love cotton sateen. I think cotton sateen is a very, very lovely, a little bit heavier weight cotton, and it sews very easily. If you're going to be making a woven pattern, a cotton sateen, while it is a little bit heavier, will be a very easy fabric to sew because it's got that little bit of give and that little bit of stretch across the fabric. You're going to find that even if you do make a little bit of a mistake, it's a little bit more forgiving. So it also has a really lovely soft feel. So if you have some sensory issues, a cotton sateen will be really nice and smooth against your skin. I'd also be recommending if you have sensory issues to really start looking at natural fibers, because natural fibers will probably give you less irritation than artificial fibers. The drawback on that is that natural fibers tend to be more expensive, with the exception of cotton. Cotton is generally very, very cheap because it is easy to grow. So going back to our chat about fibers versus weave, this is also a cotton. Let's turn it around. So this is also a cotton. Do you know what? I've got many, many more here. This is a cotton. Okay, so this is a cotton lycra. And we can see that this cotton lycra stretches a lot more than our cotton sateen. Now this one is what we call a two-way stretch, which means it stretches across the fabric, and it does stretch up and down, but not as much. So this is a t-shirt cotton. So if we're going back to our Bronte dress and we're making a choice between this fabric or this fabric, we would be choosing this fabric because this one wants woven fabric. Now, you'll notice that in our fabric recommendations, it doesn't say anything about cotton. What this one is looking for, from what it would tell me, is with a crepe, a linen, or a rayon, this is looking for a relatively light woven fabric. And we do want it to be light because we can see that this dress is quite drapey. And what do we mean by drapey? So a drapey fabric is one where we want it to flow a little bit. All right. So this is a very beautiful fabric I bought from Potter & Co. I absolutely love this fabric. Now this is a cotton silk blend. And we can see that when I hold up just one layer of this fabric, it's a little bit sheer, but also it drapes really beautifully. All right, so it's got a lot of movement to it. It's a very, very soft, flowy fabric. If we do the same with the cotton sateen, it's a bit heavier, so it doesn't really, this is hard to see, isn't it? I'm really sorry about that. Let's use a lighter color of cotton. So this is just a cotton poplin, and it doesn't have as much drape. It's a little bit crisper than our silk cotton. All right. So we're looking at how crisp a fabric is, and a really, really good way to have a look at what kind of fabric do I want to choose is obviously to think about what are we making. So this dress, let's go back to the pattern on the website. Now I can see here this has been made from quite a crisp fabric, and you can see it's standing away from the person's body quite a bit. Whereas this one's made from a bit of a lighter fabric. Now it's exactly the same dress, but you can see at the bottom here, it's sort of waving a little bit more than this one, which is standing out quite crisply. So I think this has actually been made from a relatively heavy linen or cotton, and this has been made from a really lightweight weave of cotton or linen. Now this one at the end here again is made with a more lightweight fabric because it's draping at the bottom a lot more than our first white example here. So I guess what you want to think about when you're also choosing your fabrics is making sure that you think, what do I actually want from this pattern? Do I want this to be something where the bottom of my dress is going to stay away from my body a little bit? In which case, you're going to pick your cotton sateen, because this is a much heavier weight of fabric and it's going to have a bit of its own body so that it can hold itself out away from your body. If you want something a bit more flowy, you're going to choose something like this cotton silk blend and probably line it, to be fair. And it's going to flutter around you as you move. So those are definitely things that you need to consider when choosing your fabrics. And it's so easy to just go, oh my goodness, I bought this beautiful fabric. I'm just going to go make this beautiful pattern that I saw, without actually considering, is it the right fabric for the pattern? I'm sure you've all heard it said many times before, but fabric choice and planning are a much huger part of sewing than actually sitting at your sewing machine and getting to work and sewing. Sewing is definitely 80% preparation and 20% sewing. So that's why tools like thread loop are so incredibly valuable, because in thread loop we can even, and you know what, we're going to come in here and we're going to alter my pretty floral dress, because we're going to add the Bronte pattern to it. We're going to go down here and we're going to go, you know what, we're just going to search. We're going to search for the Bronte pattern and we're going to add it in. There we go. So I had originally thought maybe I would make out of this beautiful fabric. So I designed this fabric and it is a cotton sateen. I was thinking maybe this dress. Now I want to show you why this dress would have been a mistake. What we can see here is this is looking for light to mid-weight cotton. So cotton, silk, wool, viscose. Now, how to make how to do fashion have very detailed, fabulous instructions. You can see here they say not suitable for jersey. What that means is it's not suitable for stretch fabrics. I could probably make this pattern work with a stretch fabric, but they're asking you not to do it. They're saying, hey, no, don't try and do a stretch fabric with this. It's not going to work. And you can see when we look at the various iterations, this is a really lovely crisp dress, which is why it's saying it wants light to mid-weight cottons, so, or silks or Cupro. We'll talk about Cupro in a moment. It's a really interesting fabric. So my cotton sateen that I have in the other room, I would say is closer to a heavier mid-weight fabric. And when we look at this beautiful drape at the top here, it would lose that drape if I made it in a cotton sateen. And this is the iteration of this dress that I want to make. We can see it's got two different options. You can make it with this beautiful cowl neck, or you can make it with just the straight round neck. Now, if I was going to be making the straight round neck, which is this one, the cotton sateen would be perfect. It would be lovely and crisp and gorgeous. But because what we're wanting, or what I'm wanting to do, is make this lovely cowl neck, I need something that's going to drape nicely. So the cotton sateen is the wrong choice, which means when we go back to our project, what we're going to do is go, nope, we're not going to make that pattern from it. Let's have a look at our Peggy White Christmas bodice. Now this is a beautiful charm pattern, and it's an extension pattern from Gertie. And I love Gertie also, bless her heart, she does the most amazing instructions. I love that pretty much all of her patterns have tutorial videos, and she does a lot of information about fabric notes and what to make her patterns from. So fabric notes, so fabric recommendations and the Peggy bodice instructions will work for this dress, but also velveteen is a good option, chamoose. So what she's wanting you to do is find a fabric that's going to have a little bit of movement. Now I know this is going to be a little bit hard to see, but I'm wearing a green velvet top. Let me see if I can I'll just pull my video down a little bit for a minute. So let's see, you can sort of see there. So this top I actually made from the scraps of a dress that I was making. It's got a really lovely cowl neck to it. You can see while velvet is quite often considered a heavier fabric, this is a stretch velvet and it's actually quite light. So it holds a cowl neck drape really quite beautifully. And this is actually the top of the pattern, that we said, no, we're not going to make our cotton sateen dress out of it. So while this is a heavier fabric, because I know that that velvet will drape beautifully, and it's got lots of little fibers, so it catches the light in really interesting ways, it was a really good choice for making this top. And so those are things you want to consider. How does the fabric catch the light? Is it something that's got a little bit of extra shimmer to it? Because we can see here, you can actually see the color of the fabric right here, and you can see a lovely strip of it. I'm working backwards, guys, apologies. You can see a lovely strip of it catching the light right here. And when I turn towards the light, you can see that it catches it a little bit more at different angles. Now, velvet is not a beginner fabric, 100% not a beginner fabric. It moves, it shifts, it flips around, and it does really strange and weird things. So hold off on using velvet until you are a little bit more experienced with sewing in general. But if you are going to try a velvet, I definitely recommend a velour or a stretch velvet to start with. It's going to be a much easier option. Anyway, going back to our pattern choices. So this one, what we do like is, and we can have a look at the Peggy bodice, which will have more information. But you can see this one only gives 2 fabric options because it's a specific alteration for a bodice that already exists. All right. This is gorgeous. I really should make this out of another green velvet. I don't have any of this green velvet left. I used all of it making a different dress. So again, maybe this is not the right choice for our green sateen. And I think we would lose, if we did look at this, you can see it's got these beautiful, beautiful gathers under the bodice. And a cotton sateen would hold that nicely. But I think we're going to lose some of the magic of this dress. It really is gorgeous, isn't it? We're going to lose some of the magic of this dress by trying to make it out of this. Because this dress is all about the fabric, right? And this pattern is all about the cut of the dress. So what we're going to do is we're going to go, yep, this was not the right pattern for this fabric. We're going to get rid of it. So our Bronte dress. Now, I love that you've got some options with this dress. And I am going to make it from that fabric. And it'll be one of our videos coming up. And the reason I'm going to make it is because while it is a bit of a heavier fabric, I do want it to stand out from my body a little bit. Because of my body shape, I'm quite hourglass. This is going to come in where I want it to come in. It's going to flare out where I want it to flare out. It's going to give me a really nice waist shape. And those darts, you're still going to see them nicely when it comes to that really gorgeous fabric. Now, obviously, we can see here that this has been made from all plain fabrics predominantly, except down here. I love that this choice of pattern is a little bit different, or this choice of fabric is a little bit different. So there's not a lot of detail to this pattern. It's a very blurry pattern, but you can still see the style lines of this dress. Whereas on a woven, you can see it on this, but it does lose some of it. I really want those style lines to stand out. So having a big bold pattern like the one that I want to use with my fabric that I've designed. This is my Australian Florals Protea fabric. Let's go have a look at it. So you can see it's quite a large design. So, you know, each floral is about this big. So compressing that down into pleats is going to cause a bit of distraction to the eye and draw you straight to the waist. And it's going to draw you to how small my waist looks because it's pulling in quite a bit at the waist and then flipping out underneath it. So there are so many different things to consider when you're looking at designing your own wardrobe, designing your own dresses, and considering, is this the right fiber content? Is this the right weave? Is this the right actual pattern on top of the fabric to be using as well? So I think the Bronte dress is quite forgiving, that you're going to get a different look whether you do a plain fabric or whether you do a patterned fabric. Another really good example of that is this one here, made from the black. This is gorgeous. This looks so lovely on this lady, but I just realized you guys can't see because I'm predominantly taking up the screen. I'm so sorry. I'm going to go back and have to show you some of that all over again. So what we'll notice is that on this black version of the dress, that you will be seeing very, very vaguely some pleating, but you can't really see the style lines. It really does hide the style lines of the dress, whereas this lovely fabric here, so this patterned fabric, I would probably call this an abstract. You can see that you can actually catch the style lines in the dress a bit more. So when we're looking at this fabric, it's going to catch the style lines of that dress quite a bit more. Than if you were to make the dress from something like just a black satin. Again, would still look lovely, but you're going to miss those style lines. So we're wanting to highlight the style lines, which is what we're doing with a patterned fabric. We're highlighting the style lines. Or do we want them to blend into the background a little bit more, which is what we're doing with a darker plain fabric. So definitely looking at your different types of fibers and the different fiber contents is going to make a really big difference for you. Now, another option that would be really lovely would be something like this black embroidered linen. So this embroidered linen is one that I picked up from Fabric Restore, which is up in Templestowe, or Ivanhoe, sorry, in Melbourne. Please check them out. They're absolutely fantastic. They are a fabric recycling company where you can take your fabric in and donate it or swap it for fabrics that they have there. And then they sell on fabrics for very, very reasonable prices. This is an absolutely gorgeous linen cotton blend. You can see it is embroidered, so it's not just painted on. This is actually embroidered onto the fabric, and I believe I picked this up for about $10 a metre, which is an absolute steal. When we look at the cost of linens normally, they're sort of $20 to $50 a metre. For good reason, it's a really good quality fibre, but this is just gorgeous, so definitely check them out. Now, this is a bit of a... Linen is an interesting fabric. Let's have a little chat about linen. Linen is very, very popular at the moment. It's what I would call a bit of a, probably an ancient or historical weave of fabric or historical fibre of fabric. Linen is made from flax, which is obviously a type of grain, and it is a fabric that starts off quite stiff and crispy. The more you wear it, the more you wash it, the lighter it becomes. And I made some really fantastic pants out of a linen that I've had sitting in my stash for multiple years because I looked at it when I got it and went, it's not actually what I was expecting. And it was quite crispy. So I threw it in the washing machine, threw it in the dryer, folded it up, stuck it in my stash, and never really looked at it again. A couple of years after just sitting around not doing a lot, I took it out and it had really softened up. And you're going to find with linen, the more you wear it, the more it softens. The more you wash it, the more it softens. So another interesting choice in that when you initially make something with it, it is going to sit differently to how it does when you've worn it multiple times. So definitely something to factor in there. This is why I really think researching types of fabrics is going to be incredibly important. So I'm going to link this resource below so that you can all definitely have a look at it and what it's all about. But a couple that I really want to touch on are, for a start, a chiffon. So a chiffon is a very lightweight weave of fabric. I would almost call this, I would call this a chiffon. All right. So it's quite often, it's a very floaty, it's what we associate with those beautiful floofy fairy skirts and, fluffy bridal gowns often are made from a chiffon. Chiffon can be made from polyester, cotton, silk, all sorts of different types of fabrics. So definitely it's one that's a bit of a lighter weight, really breezy, beautiful fabric. And you can see there that chiffon has a slight shine, small puckers that make the fabric light and rough to the texture. And it's something that definitely when you touch it, it just feels so soft and light and lovely. So it is one that you're going to have to be a little bit careful with because it does tend to be sheer. So if you are going to work with chiffon, you're either going to have to line it or you're going to want to wear something under it. Or you don't have to if you don't want to. You do you, my friend. If you want to put yourself out there, it is entirely up to you. Probably not my jam, but that's fine. So I think there's a little bit of crossover here in that I wouldn't say cotton is a type of fabric. I'm going to say cotton is a fiber. Cashmere is a fiber. Canvas is a weave. So we're looking at here. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of crossover in this article. I might find some other resources for you, but yeah, because there's some crossover in here where we're looking at what is a linen, what is a merino, what is a modal. Some of these are fibers. They're not actually, well, that's infuriating. I'm going to write some resources for you guys because at the end of the day, I want you to be able to have some good resources available that talk about what are the differences between a fiber and a weave. So let's have a bit of a look at gingham. Gingham is another one that is very, very popular at the moment. Now, I don't think this is accurate. Gingham is not always cotton. Gingham quite often is a polyester cotton blend. I've seen linen ginghams available. So gingham is again a weave or a dye pattern rather than being an actual type of fabric. So it's that beautiful, let's find a gingham for you. I have many a gingham in my stash. This is a lovely, cute little gingham that I've got, which has got some cherry embroidery on top. So, oh, it's actually strawberry. Ignore me. So this is what we would call a broderie anglaise linen. So it's embroidered fabric. This is also a broderie anglaise, this fabric. So it basically just means embroidered fabric in French. And going back to the gingham aspect of it, gingham are these lovely checks. So let's find one that has a little bit less detail over the top because it's going to make it a bit easier for you guys to see. Here we go. We've got this lovely green gingham. So this is a really nice cotton linen blend gingham that I got from Super Cheap Fabric. And gingham has some really distinct characteristics. We've got these really dark chunks of fiber, and then we've got your two slightly lighter weight, and then we've got a white. So the way that a gingham is woven is from your white and your green, And where the two cross over, you get a lighter weave. So what you're going to notice if we look a little bit closer is that this is all green fibers. This is all white. And these are a mix of the two, because you can see in there when we look a little bit more closely that there's both green and white going through the weave of these different ones here. We're not going to get into warp and weft today. That's a whole other thing when we're talking about weaving fabrics together. But the way that gingham is woven on the loom basically means at this point they've been weaving together just the green fibers. At this point they've been weaving together just the white fibers, and this is a mix of the two. And that is how that beautiful gingham pattern is made. Now, if you want to tell in which way they've put the fibers across, this here is entirely when, oh look, that's even better. We can see really clearly when we go that close in. When something's been put on a loom to weave it, they're doing, say, 20 lines of green thread and then 20 lines of white thread. 20 lines of green, 20 lines of white. And then when they're weaving across the fabric, they're doing the same thing. They're alternating between green and white threads and weaving them in between. Gingham is a very, very simple weave. And if we scroll back in again, you're going to see there, it's not too detailed, I'm really sorry. And we can go all into weaving and how it's done. But it's a very simple weave. You know, when you're in school and your teacher got you to weave some wool and you made that little square of, you know, your first little tapestry. It's essentially how a gingham is made. It's a very easy weave of fabric. We can tell that with this one, when we look at it closely, that it isn't printed on the fabric. This is woven through the fabric. A really easy way to tell is a pattern woven through the fabric or printed on the fabric is to look at the back of the fabric. So we can tell this pattern is printed on the fabric because on the front it's very, very bright and on the back it's white. So it's been printed over the top. But we can tell with a gingham, for example, that it's going to look very similar on the front and the back because it's woven fibers of those colors together as opposed to being printed on the fabric afterwards. There's really advantages and disadvantages to both. It doesn't really matter as much in the construction of your garment which you choose. You can choose a printed cotton, you can choose a woven cotton which has the color woven into it like that. Fibers or fabrics that are dyed before they're woven together, like a gingham, tend to be more expensive because the weaving of them is more complex, which is why digitally printed fabrics tend to be a little bit cheaper. You're never going to go into Spotlight or any other fabric store and see something like a Disney print of fabric that has been woven together with the various fibers. That would be so ridiculously expensive. They're always going to be digitally printed. But you might find some really beautiful fabrics of some fairly simple weaves in various different stores that are a woven pattern. And there are so many beautiful different examples out there. I will try and find some and put them up on my Instagram so that you can have a look at some different options. So you can see where the actual topic of looking at what fabric am I going to use for my pattern does get a little bit more complex. And the best advice that I can give you when it comes to learning to sew and choosing your fibers is to stick with the recommendations as closely as possible to what the pattern is recommending. So you could go a cotton poplin, you could go a crepe. I do want to talk a little bit about crepe. So crepe is a fabric that tends to be a little bit more textured on the back and a little bit more flat on the front sometimes. That would be a satin back crepe, can be like that. But crepe has a little bit more texture to it, but still tends to be a light weave of fabric. It's one that is quite easy to use and sew with while being a light weave. So definitely something I would recommend as a beginner fabric, especially if you're wanting to make something a little bit more flowy and floaty, but you don't want to be struggling with what you're sewing. Another really good tool to always make sure you've got in your arsenal is a walking foot. Walking feet on sewing machines mean that it's not just the teeth at the bottom of your sewing machine that are pulling the fabric through. The teeth on the top are also then pulling the fabric through. Now, Janome have quite a distinct walking foot. These don't look the same as a walking foot for most other machines, but they all work on the same principle. They're all moving the fabric from the top and the bottom at the same time, which can make your sewing journey a lot easier, especially when you're first learning to sew. Because if you've ever tried to sew something up and you've gotten to the bottom and all of a sudden, instead of everything lining up perfectly, you've got a bit of space between, it means that your fibers underneath were pulled, or your fabric underneath was pulled through faster than the fabric on the top, and it is going to cause some distortion in your clothing. So as much as possible when you are learning, try using a walking foot. I think you'll find it a lot easier. They can be a little bit noisy, but they really help you to move the fabric in a very simple way. So let's quickly have a look at if we were going to be doing a stretch pattern or a stretch fabric. Stretch fabrics tend to be a little bit more forgiving, I think you could say. So what's a really good example I can show you of a stretch? Here we go. So this one here, the Lucille trousers, we're going to have a bit of a look at the instructions on these ones. Now, the Lucille trousers are ones that call for, I love this. I can't wait to make these. They're going to be so fabulous. But they want something a little bit more flowy, because if you try to make these with a super structured fabric, like super structured, you are going to end up with something that does not sit right, especially if, like me, you've got a little bit of a tummy that you don't really like to have on show. You're going to end up with things sitting in a way that you don't really like. Now, look, I'm wrong. This one does want a woven. I have made this before with a stretch and it did work very nicely. Let's look at a pattern that is designed specifically for stretch. So pattern types, fabric type, we're going to go with a knit at this point. All right, so I'm not looking at swimwear. All right, let's have a look at the Joan dress. I think that's a really good example. I've made the Joan dress a few times and it's one that I really, really love. Again, it's a charm pattern. I really love charm patterns because I think particularly for beginners, Gertie, who makes charm, who is this gorgeous lady who's always on the front, because she is so detailed with her instructions, it's just going to make it a lot easier for you to figure out what you're actually doing. She gives so many choices. She even builds in cup sizes. You can see here we've got the choice of A, B to C, D to D, F to G cup, H cup. She goes up to a H cup. I know, it's so good. So what's really great is that she gives a lot of really good fabric recommendations. So she talks you through, with this one, we're looking for a stable knit. So around 50% stretch with the grain and 0 to little stretch in the length. So what that means is she's looking for a two-way stretch. So when I was saying before, let's go back to this one. Now this would be great to make this dress with and create some very fun style lines. This stretches across the fabric, but it doesn't stretch as much up and down the fabric. So this would make a really lovely Joan dress. Now, that's not to say you can't make the Joan dress with a fabric like this cotton lycra, which stretches both ways, but you're gonna have some pulling. So the reason that Gertie is recommending, and she actually says it in the pattern, which is great. If you find a fabric that stretches in the lengthways direction, you'll need to modify the cutting and layout. And she even recommends here, we're looking for a ponte, an interlock, double knits, stretch velvet, stretch sequins. I've made this from stretch sequins and it looked fantastic. Stretch wools and other knits. So she even gives you really good cutting layouts and how you want to cut this dress. Honestly, if you are starting out and you want something that's going to be a bit easier, go for some Charm patterns. Or, Charm is amazing as a pattern company. Ellie and Mac are really good as well. She also does videos and gives really good instructions. But just keep things easy for yourself and follow the instructions on the pattern that say, here is the type of fabric you want to use, until you've done some more research about different fibers and different weaves so that you are familiar with how they work. So as I was saying before, I've actually made the Lucille trousers, even though they say it's for a woven. I've actually made these out of a ponte before. All right, so a ponte is a fairly mid-weight knit fabric. It falls really nicely. It doesn't have a huge amount of stretch. It is quite structured, and that's why it worked. And I made them a size down. I just didn't want to put a zipper in, and I was being lazy. So if you are more confident in your sewing, you can get away with doing those types of things. While you are still learning, don't do it. Just make life easy for yourself and follow the recommendations. And if you come across something like our style arc pattern that says, we want you just to use a crepe, a rayon, or a linen, do yourself a favor and go, what is crepe fabric? Here we go. And it'll tell you exactly what it is. So even if you find another fabric which is similar in its description, chances are it'll also work for making that pattern, okay? Thank you so much for joining me today. I know I was a little bit late. I do apologize. I'm not always the best at being on time. I'm going to leave you guys with that for now because I think that's quite a lot to absorb in terms of fabric choices. If you do have some questions, feel free to follow up. We've got a lot of different ways that you can contact me. You can message me on Instagram. We have a Discord. I'll pop up the details of the Discord in the replay of this video. But I'm always open to questions. I love chatting with you guys and finding out what you've learned, what are you working on yourself at the moment, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.